Well, hello everybody. A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audiences joining us. My name is Shikhar Visnoi, and I'll be your host for this chat. Thank you for joining us in the very first session of Conversations That Matter, a series of live conversations that will be covering relevant topics related to today's business world, but especially focusing on those aspects that need to be spoken about in today's day and age. A little about myself. I'm a B2B marketing specialist and I work with Zensar Technologies, which is a mid-tier IT and digital solutions organization. I'm based out of India and I lead marketing for the BFSI vertical at Zensar. Personally, I'm an ardent believer in the power of storytelling, and that's what I'm aiming to focus in today's conversation and in the larger sense of conversations that matter, the series. I also want to thank Talentilla, the organizer of this chat. Talentilla is a new age marketing agency that focuses on brands across industries around the globe. We'll talk more about Talentilla towards the end of this video. For today's session, with the end of June as of yesterday, we completed the celebration of the Pride Month. And today we will discuss about various initiatives small and large organizations have taken to celebrate Pride, to express their solidarity towards the LGBTQ community, which itself is a very strong step towards diversity, equity, equality, and inclusion at all workplaces. That also brings us to the question and the topic for today: is adding rainbow to our logos enough? With that, I want to welcome the panelists for today's session, Jackie Handy and Nikita Das.
Hi, Shikhar.
Hello, Jackie. Hi, Nikita. Jackie, Nikita, thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
I'll quickly introduce you both. Jackie Handy is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant in the UK. She's an author, corporate trainer, and a TEDx speaker, and leverages these roles to encourage safe conversations, education, and inclusion in businesses and at workplaces. Jackie herself is a member of the LGBTQ community, and that is where she gets her passion for the work. Our second panelist is Nikita Das. Nikita is the area director of marketing for Hyatt Hotels in the West India region. She spent over 11 years in the luxury and hospitality industry, working with organizations such as Ogilvy, Taj Group, and Marriott International. Nikita is also a contributing editor at Business World, Hindustan Times, and Economic Times, which is where her recent article on the LGBTQ community was received and praised very well by over 4,000 readers. Nikita, Jackie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us, Shikhar.
Yeah, likewise.
Great. So without wasting any time, I want to jump to our very first topic of discussion. And to set some context, for all our audiences, the journey of Pride, and the Pride Month started over 50 years ago, when Stonewall Inn, which was a very popular bar in New York, it was raided by the police in June 1969. That ignited a lot of frustration in the LGBTQ community, leading to protests and activism for a very long time in the US, and also trickling down to the rest of the world. It took that movement more than 30 years before the first Pride Month in June 1999 was announced by President Bill Clinton in the United States. Now, Jackie, Nikita, keeping in mind where we started from, how do you view the initiatives business organizations today are taking to celebrate the Pride Month and express their views and solidarity on diversity and inclusion? Jackie, do you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure. And I think great background information for the viewers. I think it's important to highlight that the Stonewall riot came about not just because of a one-time raid by police, but in fact there'd been ongoing harassment and victimization of people using that bar. And so I think people had kind of had enough and rebelled. And that's really what caused it in the beginning. So, I think today we're seeing lots of organizations have various initiatives around Pride Month, and some of them beyond, which is the most important thing. I don't want to kind of talk about any particular brands, but what I will say is I think people are waking up to the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion for business. to become more, to have their businesses more representative of their customer base and the world in general. And of course, that includes everybody, the diverse population that we have amongst us. So, some of the initiatives are rather performative, if I'm honest, where we just see perhaps a logo change, but actually there's nothing of substance under that surface. Whereas others are really focusing either I guess out there with their logo, but also importantly within the organization, and it's those within that will really make the difference. And I'll talk more about that as we go through this conversation, but I'll let Nikita come in with her points as well.
Thank you, Jackie. Yes, Shikhar, I would second what Jackie is saying. We've come a long way, if you see, right, from where it started and when we started, from when the movement, rather the revolution started. But how we manifest it in our country, we have a long way to go, right? For organizations to build diversity in their culture is like putting it into the DNA system of an organization. I am a marketer, right? I am not a person who is in HR or builds policies and programs. But I, having been in the communications industry and people management, I know how important this community of ours is as associates to have equal rights, and rather to be like a more egalitarian workforce together rather than a very hierarchical workforce in any organization. So I feel for us to be, it's comprehensive to have this kind of a workforce to strike the right balance between people. I mean, we have come a long way, but it is it is yet to be a part of our DNA, our culture of working. Because like Jackie said, today, when I relate to KPIs and performance is directly related to the well-being of an associate and the respect that we give to every associate, irrespective of the class, creed, sexual orientation that they belong to, on the category that they belong to. So organizations, it is being talked about, but we are yet to see the manifestation of it in our programs and policies,
Well, thank you, Jackie, Nikita. And I have to say, I absolutely agree to, both the aspects you guys, brought up. One, I have been in the corporate for, just a little over 7 years, and I have seen the perception changing in a massive way, And even these campaigns, sometimes, small or large, they still have had, a reasonable impact to play in normalizing, talking about diversity and inclusion with respect to the LGBTQ community. That said, there's still absolutely a very, very long way to go till we can, talk about inclusion and safety at workplace in the real sense. And that brings me to my next question. Which is like on the same lines, while we mentioned that many initiatives are being taken up, there are certain aspects which still are majorly missing. And Jackie, I want to ask you that, with the aspects that are still missing in the approach which is being taken by corporates or all around the world, what do you think is, something which is so imperative, but organizations are not taking an action towards, in order to make workplaces truly safe and inclusive?
Right. And thank you. What a great question. I think the first thing is, and you hit it there with just the last bit that you said, safe and inclusive. I think one of the things that is missing, there's a few things that are missing in my opinion. The first is that for organizations that are starting to focus on D&I, what they're often doing is they're focusing so much attention on attracting and recruiting diverse talent but without creating the environment where those people can thrive. So, we often start, when we say D&I or DE&I, and I would almost reverse that, because if we're really going to create environments where people can be, as everybody says, their authentic selves at work, then we are responsible for creating those environments that allow for that. We cannot simply expect people from marginalized groups to be the ones doing all of the work, right? We have to all be allies to our fellow human beings and be proactive in supporting that. And so that leads me to perhaps another key fundamental that is missing in many organizations, and that is the recognition that you cannot just simply put everybody through some unconscious bias training in your organization and the problem is solved. It doesn't work like that. These are long-term commitments and continuous commitments of time and effort. And I think there are organizations that are feeling like it's too big a hill to climb, too much of a challenge. There are other, especially in the world right now, many other business priorities. And so perhaps it's taking a back seat. And just one final thing I'll mention, if I may, and that is leaders of businesses are missing the fact that they must get comfortable in the uncomfortable, right? Because the leaders in organizations are extremely capable, extremely competent. They will have made, in many cases, had time, years to create very successful businesses. And now the diversity, equity, and inclusion space requires them to almost unlearn and undo some of the previous ways of working to start proactively working differently. And that needs depth of understanding as to their own flaws, the questions that they ask of themselves. And that takes quite a lot of introspection. And I think that that is a big challenge that we have to break through in order to really create sustained change.
That's actually very true, Jackie. And Nikita, I want to understand and hear your views also. Jackie mentioned a lot of unlearning, undoing, and covering a lot more ground than organizations are doing today. What do you think? Like, what are some steps which organizations can actually take to aid adoption of a safe and inclusive workplace culture, in addition to what we are already seeing around?
Right. So just to add to that, Shikhar, I believe organizations, and myself being part of organizations only, I haven't worked all by myself as prolifically as Jackie is doing as a self-entrepreneur. It takes a lot to be, of that also, to have so much willpower to do yourself. But as part of organizations, the least that you can do is add to that change, right? And over the years, I have seen a lot of change happening in safety at workplace for women, especially with the growing crime against women that is happening in this country. If you look at the statistics, then the World Bank report, that was the World Bank report of 2017, says India ranks 120th, that is till date, okay, out of the rest of 131 countries in women workforce, right? So which means that we're still way behind in the rank profile of women workforce. But we are still trying to make amends in the women workforce, giving them the kind of safety parameters to feel safe, and hence giving them a sense of belongingness to an organization. I, being part of various international American organizations, can see that. But not many Indian organizations, like solo entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs who have started their own company, which are homegrown. We today talk about made in India, right? We're talking about opening up companies and getting talent development, like what Talentella does, developing in talent within the country and sourcing talent within the country, and then instilling that kind of support and confidence in them for them to grow, for them to be leaders of tomorrow. But if you do not fix the first primary problems, which means the safety, diversity, including them in performance, including workforce, women workforce in the top tier of the leadership of an organization. Now, this 120th rank out of 131 countries means that the ratio of men to women is also lacking, right? In the Indian context of workforce, men versus women. This is gender diversity, and this is just a part of the diversity and inclusion. There are so many other kinds of diversity which we will bring up while we speak further. But I'm saying these are basics that we need to fix, and we only see this as a learning curve, because if in the West the companies are doing it and they're doing such a brilliant job of safety of women in workforce, making them feel safe with giving them cars late night. If there are women, like in my organization, there are women that are given timings for work, timings that suit them. If you're on an 8 hours roster, then you're given an 8 hour. If it's a midnight roster, you can leave in the morning after 7 o'clock, which means after sunrise. very subtle changes to their lifestyle, work lifestyle, to make that difference. Now, these are Western companies, but have we done this enough in our Indian mindset, in our Indian companies? That is the vision that we need to go ahead with. That's the area that we need change in.
And
that is,
can I add actually to that, because I think that's a great point that you make, Nikita. And I would also just add that, yes, we need to change to develop as a society, but organizations really must want to change. That's the key, because there's always choice. As human beings, we have choice. We can choose to change, or we can choose to remain as we always have. And those that don't choose to change will eventually be left behind. I think that's a really important addition to the great words that Nikita spoke.
Absolutely, Jackie.
That is so true. Absolutely, Jackie, Nikita. I 100% agree with that. And, I just want to add, because personally, I'm based out of India, and I have traveled, to some of the, larger developed countries as well. And I think a lot definitely depends on, where culturally each country or each, geographical, and social economic, environment, how that is aiding to the adoption, because every country, every geography has had their own journey. And that is why we also see the difference in willingness, as you mentioned, Jackie, and also ability, Nikita, which you mentioned, of organizations and individuals. As an individual, I see so many groups, or people around me who are even willing to be an ally or to support the group, but they're still lacking awareness or basic understanding of how to be sensitive or how to say the right things. And that is also such a large ground to cover. And it's not an objective direction that, okay, this one thing will turn everything around. It has to be taken very subjectively based on where each individual, each group of people are coming from. And that brings me to my next question as well, Nikita, Jackie, that while some of these organizations we have seen are already taking some initiatives, in their own capacity, but there are many, many organizations which haven't even started considering or haven't even started taking any conscious step in the direction of inclusivity and safety for the LGBTQ community at workplaces. If you have to guide them, what do you think, would be the first right steps for them to adopt? And, I would want, Jackie, maybe for you to focus on the Europe and UK context a little more. And, Nikita, you're based out of India. Maybe you can focus a little more from Indian context, because the journeys will be very, very different. Nikita, I'll let you go first on that.
Right. So from the Indian context, Shikhar, how companies that haven't done this before, it is a learning curve, right? So you can only learn, and like how Jackie said, unlearn and probably relearn. And for those organizations that haven't, by observing. I mean, there are today, there is no dearth of learning platforms, right? I mean, the world is your oyster with the digital proliferation. So it is for companies to hire the right resources in, say, a learning and development cell. Like every company that starts its workforce, even if it is a team of 2 people, like a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, they will always have a HR and an L&D, if not a learning and development center, but an HR. It is the primary motive of an HR to educate themselves and then bring about that cultural change. So it is really looking out into what is happening in terms of policies and implementation, and what is happening, what is being said in workforce across the globe, in not just the LGBTQI community and their workforce development, but across the workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion, the entire aspect. So it is really about looking at the right platforms, learning and taking inspiration from companies that have set benchmarks, and then looking at incorporating that culture into ours. But earlier we could have said, if there was no digital proliferation, we could have said probably only when you travel, when you have exposure to an international or to established organizations, can you learn from them. And at that time, training and felicitation was a large part of focus before digital. But today, with the digital at our best, the world is at our fingertips. So it's just about knowing where to go to learn the right aspects of DE&I and DNI of workforce, and then the implementation then just gets easier, rather.
That is very true, and I love the mention of the digital, element, because that has truly made everything much easier, and doesn't give people, the, I wouldn't say excuse, but a reason to possibly not adapt or adopt, because there is so much knowledge and footprint left by organizations which have done a great work. Jackie,
Right.
what do you want to say, from a slightly more global, perspective of the Western world, possibly, if I can say.
Sure. Well, perhaps this comment will cross over, cross borders, as it were. We'll see. But for me, my thoughts are that if a business is wondering where to start, then I think first of all that's a great sign, because it says they want to start. They've made that decision and that choice to start. And what do they say? You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So that's a positive step. The second thing I would say then is to really evaluate your organization as is right now. And I don't just mean in terms of diversity split, because there's a high percentage of people in the LGBTQ community who are not actually out at work, and there'll be many reasons for that, one of which perhaps they don't actually feel safe enough to be authentic in their workplace right now. But certainly leaders, employers can evaluate the current state of their workforce, but also I ask them to think wider. So really think about, what is the vision for your organization? And like I say, maybe this crosses borders. Where do you want your organization to be? How do you want it to be perceived? What do you want your customers and your potential customers to be saying about you and your organization? And going back to my earlier point about the diversity of humanity, and therefore the potential customer base is huge, and hugely diverse, right? So ignore it at your peril. And as someone who specializes in this arena, clearly I would love the world to say, we get this, it's very heartfelt, we love our fellow human beings, and we want to make space for all of them. But I'm realistic enough to recognize that not everybody will be drawn into the space in that way. And some people need to know about cold, hard cash. Bottom line, what is this going to commercially mean for my business? And I don't need to repeat statistics that are widely documented, that diverse and inclusive organizations are more innovative, creative, and ultimately profitable than homogenous organizations. But there, I just did, just to really make the point that whether you're starting the journey from the heart or whether you're starting the journey from the head, there is still a case for diversity, equity, and inclusion in business. And I say again, ignore at your peril. So, Nikita is right. The digital world that we live in means that there's so much accessibility. Look, I'm in the UK, you're in India, and here we are on a platform together. This is how easy it can be. So start the journey. My Stephen Covey said famously, seek first to understand before being understood. And so, I urge people to really invest in their own learning. Now, whether they partner with someone, who does the work that I do, or whether they just take their own initiative and learn, but learn nonetheless. Take time to understand. And again, just finally, if I may, you see behind me, I have the map, and that is significant because, we all have our own unique map of the world. We will all come to this table from a different start point, with our own perspectives based on culture, heritage, identity, and experience. And so once we recognize that, and that every single one of us has our flaws, and every single one of us has our strengths, that creates an openness and a compassion for humanity. And that is a great place to begin the journey.
True. Shikhar, Jackie, I also want to add one more point. While Jackie was talking about multicultures, right, from the map like she has behind her. I mean, it just made me realize there's this book I read by Erin Mayer. It's called The Culture Map, right? It is a beautiful, it's a whole, it talks about the buckets of different cultures across the country, across the world, wherein how people perceive in an organization coming out, right? Like talking about their identity, right? About their orientation. So a Japanese versus a Dutch versus European versus American, there will be different stages in people's life or in organizations where people are open, they are open to come out as they are in an organization versus in like Asian cultures like India, Japan, China, where they're a little more averse to coming out that openly. My advice through that reading is that it's just as easy as keeping an open door policy, right? Whether it is Western, the Western world, or it is Asia, across the culture map that Erin Meyer presents, it is just very easy. If you don't even need to go elsewhere onto the digital medium to learn this, but it is easy to have an open door policy where anybody can come and talk to anyone without being judgmental or being perceived judgmental. That is the first step of coming out with the whole diversity platform. And you don't, this is something that you don't even need to talk about, and it doesn't make you a diverse, like a conclusive and diversity led workforce. It just makes you very open and inclusive to talk about. And that is what we need for all organizations, to have an open door policy where you're not where you're not thought of as a person other than a regular workforce. You're just any other associate. And that's how easy it becomes. Then what matters is performance, higher profitability. Everything comes out through that. So I just want to add.
No, that's a fantastic point, Nikita, which you bring. That sometimes, like being the diversity factor, not being a factor at all, is just the best representation, of how accepting an organization is. And I do want to second Jackie's point as well, that whether you're thinking from head or the heart, large organizations, when they're inviting, requests for information and submissions for, larger contracts, I see so many, larger clients across the industry, mentioning and asking about the diversity and LGBTQ acceptance and women ratios at workplace. And it is, reflecting, so much progress compared to, where we started from. So, we have just, very little time left, and I want to just, summarize all of this. But I also want to ask Jackie, Nikita, you guys, in in 30 seconds or so, that we have come a long way. We discussed how we feel about today's initiatives as well. But if we have to now envision that how from 5 years from today, things will look like, and what are the perspectives which will change with regards to, LGBTQ community and their acceptance and inclusion in the business workplaces? How do you see that happening in the coming 5 years? Jackie, you want to go first? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, we didn't know the world would be in this position a year ago, did we? So who knows? Of course, my hope is that the world has changed and business changes. Of course, nothing changes without some effort. And we've really just skimmed the surface. Nikita's point about the culture map, it's an excellent resource, but any of this stuff can only really become embedded in an organization when it's founded on a culture of psychological safety. So when people are not fearful of opening up or even taking risks, and sometimes it takes the leader of the organization to go first, to show their own vulnerabilities, and again, that openness to understand. Where could it be? It could be a whole different place. I would love to see, just to remain on topic, the topic of this conversation, I would love to see Pride months celebrated as they are, but where all of us really know that there is no performative activism at play, and that there is a depth to the logo shift. Because frankly, and I don't want to sound ungrateful, but frankly, if there is no depth, I would rather the logo flag wasn't there. Because it means nothing. It means nothing. It's really just saying it's a way to kind of increase business, and that's not sincere or congruent. So yes, I would like to think it's changing. People are waking up to the importance of it. And, I'm reminded just in conclusion that when Simon Sinek gave his very famous Start With Why TED talk, one of the things he talks about is that continuum where people engage, and the fact that you have your early adopters all the way around to your laggers when you have something new or something fresh coming to life. And I think we're currently at that early adopter phase. And as we start to move through that continuum into sort of the more mainstream, it will become very clear for organizations that start to lag, that actually they are being exposed for as organizations with that lack of care and compassion for their fellow human beings, whomever they are. And so they will come on board. But I hope that there are few laggers and there are more people who proactively recognize the benefits to supporting our fellow human beings in all different dimensions and in all cultures.
Thank you, Jackie. Nikita.
Right. Yes, Shikhar. So for me, I would say I would quote a few examples. Okay, why purely from the perspective being a marketer and a marketing communications person, I feel the more you communicate on the subject, the more you create, awareness, visibility, and that's how the word spreads. Campaigns like Uber's Rainbow Routes, right? These are all India-based campaigns. Uber won for the whole Pride Month in 2019. They created rainbow routes across their platforms. So to kind of bring about the awareness for people that this is a community, right, that needs to be driven. United Airlines in the US, they had the same-sex partner benefits. So every time you travel with the same-sex partner, or even if you were female, like the gender, this was focusing on the gender diversity part. You're a female and you're all like as per different age groups. So they were giving partner benefits and female benefits to fly. So those are a couple of things. For hotels especially, there is a lot that is happening in the service industry. There are campaigns that are run like Pour Me Out, and they're given special privileges and incentives. In Delhi, there is a hotel called Shangri-La, which has a massive and a very famous nightclub. It's called Kitty Sue. It's a dedicated gay club, right? And it was the first of its kind because it was, I think, some 7-8 years back. The point I'm trying to make is that the reason why campaigns like these are held is so that when you you want to resonate with something and you want to talk about it more, these kind of platforms or campaigns give you that kind of these kind of campaigns give you the platform to come out and communicate. If you haven't spoken about this before, speak about it. Organizations are looked out. If your campaigns are like a Uber Rainbow campaign or a United Airlines campaign, then today Jackie and me sitting in two different countries in the world, we're talking about it. So it's everybody talks about it, and that's how you know. Only a campaign which has a larger reach and companies that do it in a way that marketing really helps spread the word. Can this community be spoken about? Can this initiative, diversity across the globe, be spoken about in a very large platform or in large wavelength? And this can go across continents, So it is not about Africa, or it is not about, the Bahamas, or we're talking about India or New York. It is not just restricted to metropolitans, but it will reach every nook and corner of the world if it is led by a very robust marketing campaign. And that will only happen in an organization when the policies and programs are not just devised by HR. Again, I speak about inclusiveness because it is not only the prerogative of an HR company or a one trainer or a consultant to come and train the leadership and the learning and development. It is for operations, the functional team, the leadership. It comes from the top. So the CEOs and the CXOs, especially the marketing, communications, and the digital teams. Everybody in a functional aspect needs to know about this tactical benefit of why are we speaking. And when companies talk about this, this becomes the task force to spread the word around. So that's the vision, or that's the purpose that companies need to have to drive a very robust marketing initiative to spread the word across with a very robust communication platform. Yeah.
That was amazing, Jackie, Nikita. Very strong, very significant. And as much as I wouldn't like to, but this brings us to the end of our conversation. And I really want to thank you, Jackie, Nikita, for sharing your thoughts and even educating our audiences, individuals, and people coming from the corporate organizations as well. So thank you very, very much for spending this time with us and sharing your honest, opinion on where the entire Pride campaign is going towards and what is the real impact it must bring and can bring in the coming days. Thank you very much. I also want to thank our audiences, for giving your time to us and being such an engaging audience. We saw a couple of comments also, and thank you very much. We appreciate that. I also want to bring Sia Subnis, who's the co-founder of Talentla, to just deliver a quick vote of thanks and just introduce Talentla as an organization to our audiences as well. See, are you there?
Yes, I am. So I just quickly wanted to thank Jackie, Nikita, and of course Shikhar for such an engaging discussion. I think we spoke about this before as to why we thought about holding this discussion, and I would just like to say that Talentella it's basically a community of amazing marketers, designers from all walks of life. And what makes them amazing is their individuality. And what we want to do is help them just feel accepted, because we spoke about this before as well, that we do think that when professionals, when people feel accepted, that is when they get their best self out. And we changed our logo too because we feel strongly about acceptance of all kind, but we also wanted to go one step further and provide this platform to just have a discussion, to just have this conversation, hopefully get the word out there and have people engage next year. And through this year, we'll take further steps in however we can to make sure that this topic just keeps growing. People keep talking about it, and we have acceptance and diversity through the community. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sia, and I really appreciate the spirit and providing us with this platform to talk about this very, very significant and relevant topic. I want to thank everybody again, and thank you for spending time with us. And I will see you all in the next session of Conversations That Matter. Bye-bye, and have a great rest of the day ahead.
Thank you, Shikhar. You've been a lovely host.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Bye, Jackie. See you.
Great to meet you all.